Hello and welcome to the Golfing Greenkeeper podcast. I'm your host, Steve Smith. I hope you've had a wonderful weekend. We kick things off. It's a Monday this time. To start the week, something a little bit different. We're going to venture into a segment that I've had once before and looking to bring you some more information and conversations about, and it's called The Boardroom. This is episode number 52. We have a new supporter, a new sponsor, a new partner for the Boardroom segment of the Golfing Greenkeeper podcast. The Boardroom is proudly brought to you by the Social Media Birdie, ladies and gentlemen. Now, the Social Media Birdie is the dynamic duo you want on your side to help you power your marketing and get patrons back into your restaurant, events at your clubhouse, and of course, we want plenty of golfers to your golf course and golf club as well. As we know, the modern world is connected and communicates like never before in history. Social media has brought enormous amounts of information to the fingertips of everyone and anyone from every source available. That's where the team at the Social Media Birdie comes in. They can assist you where it matters across all the social media platforms, helping you stay on top of industry trends, navigating around the infamous algorithm, and getting your key messages seen by your target. They will help you build a loyal, engaged group of people who will become your biggest advocate for your business. If you want the best team who understands the golf landscape like no other to work with your business, then you need the Social Media Birdie. Check out their website for more information about their services at thesocialmediabirdie.com.au. The Social Media Birdie, we're better than par. Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you once again to this new segment of the podcast that I'm really excited to bring to you. It's going to give you a bit more information and a bit more insight into a different part, more of the decision-making. It's called the boardroom. It's the decision-making process, the people that make up the committees and boards and the decision-makers in golf clubs and golf courses. And I want to bring you some of that insight where possible and where we can. Now, today we're going to venture up into Queensland to the Sunshine State. And we've talked a lot about in the past, and I certainly have talked to you about some of the devastation that's gone on with a lot of the recent floods and the heavy rainfall and all the things that then follow on from those heavy times and disturbing and devastating times with so many people. And part of that has obviously been to golf courses around the country. So we're up into Queensland, make our way to Ashgrove Golf Club, and I have on the line with me Greens Director Simon Putral. G'day, Simon. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Steve. Good to be with you.
Mate, I really appreciate your time. Now, I will mention that I did do a podcast a little while ago talking about flood recovery, and I did talk to my audience and my listeners about some of the things that had gone on to your golf course with regards to the devastating floods up there in southeastern Queensland. And you had gotten in touch with me through social media, and I really appreciated you doing so. And that sort of brought about us getting onto a podcast segment where we can talk about what's in depth and in detail behind a club like Ashgrove and what you've got to deal with, mate. So tell us a little bit about, if you can, your position, your role there in Greens Director and sort of some of the decisions that are entailed in dealing with, and give us a wrap of this devastation if you can.
Yeah, no worries. Look, I think most clubs have some sort of version of my role as Greens Director. So it's basically I'm the link between the course staff and the board and then the members. So my job is basically to make sure that the information that the course is experiencing gets relayed effectively to the board members and then obviously through to the course members as well. So I've been doing that for around about sort of 3.5 years now. And it's one of those things where you learn many things that you never thought you'd have to know about, but it's been a great experience so far.
Very good, mate. Very good. And that gives you've got a lot of information flying. It probably tends to be a little bit of a steep learning curve as well, I take it, learning a lot about the golf course. And obviously there's numbers attached to things and lots of people talking to you, sometimes yelling at you. You've got to massage people and massage information as well so that it's, it gets to the right people in the right way. There's a lot going on there sometimes, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest thing to remember when you're on the board at a golf club is that people pay their money to join a golf club. And the reason they do that is because they love golf. So whatever they come out with, whether it be good or not so good, typically comes from a place of loving golf and wanting more out of their golf course. Um, So I've been a member at golf clubs since my youth. I'm mid-40s now, so I've been around them for a while. But stepping into the board side of things is a very different world, because you really get a clear cross-section of all of the different needs of the golfers that you have. And look, Ashgrove is a course that has a long history, but it's typically a history of being for want of a better term, a lesser golf club in Brisbane. It's been an up-and-coming place. It started as a 9-hole course, got to 12, then got to 15, and finally in the 90s got to 18. But through that process, it hasn't been a Royal Queensland or a Brisbane or even a Capera, which is our nearest neighbour. So it's one of those things where we have a cross-section of members. Typically, the majority of our members are C grade and B grade. But we obviously also have a nice group of A grade members to please, but different handicaps bring different needs. And so for us, it's that whole thing of going, how can we bring the most enjoyment to people out in their round rather than necessarily the most punishment, which sometimes can be a trap that people get into, going, golf has to be hard. But for us at Ashgrove, really, the key thing is that golf is meant to be an enjoyable social activity. So what can we do to make that, across the board, from course through to club, what can we do to make that the most enjoyable activity that we can?
No, mate, that's a very good wrap of a lot of things there. And I hear you talk about, a smaller club. It's not a long, big-named, difficult, promoted in that way, resorty type golf course that you've mentioned there, a long period of growth to get to 18 holes, which is probably a lot longer than a lot of other clubs take over the course of their lives. But yeah, we have spoken, you and I, off the podcast about the fact that it's a shorter type course, and you talked about enjoyment and bringing that to your members and making sure that they get that out of a round there at Ashgrove. And I can speak from familiar grounds with where I was at Katoomba. It was a golf course that was just over 5,000 metres, and that puts sort of Ashgrove and Katoomba in similar styles and similar length. And sometimes people struggle with that a little bit, but it's good to hear you talk about getting enjoyment from a golf course. It doesn't need to be long and hard.
Yeah, look, to give a bit of background to your listeners, Ashgrove is a par 68, 4,900 metres. So 6 par 3s, 2 par 5s. Our par 4s typically have relatively significant dog legs, so you can't take your driver out and blast it everywhere. And we find that our members' handicaps travel very well generally, because Ashgrove can be quite penal once you get off the beaten path. And it's not that it's a hard place to get to the right spot, but if you try and overpower it, it jumps up and grabs you very quickly. So especially when we get to pennant season, we often have a significant home ground advantage, because people come in and go, what have I actually walked into here? For instance, our first hole is a long par 4, so 430 metre par 4, followed by a 300 metre par 4, which has got like a 60-degree dogleg. Positioning wise off the tee, if you get off the fairway on either of those holes, you've got major problems. But on the second hole, which is the dogleg, anything right is completely dead in the scrub. If you go to the left, you go down a bank and you're blocked out. So you've got a very specific sort of zone. You really need a 210 metre drive into a 20 metre wide slot. So I've got much better in the last few years of actually making sure I can keep my ball relatively straight, and I'm not worried as much about my drive. Like, your drives are important, obviously. I only get my driver out 3 times a round, though. So there's a lot more processing. Where do I need to be in the length distance rather than left to right necessarily on a lot of holes?
Yeah, okay. So, more to think about on your way around, like you said, rather than just pulling the driver out on every hole that's not a par 3 and just hitting it away.
Yep.
Very, very good, mate. So, okay, we talked a little bit about the history of the court. Let's talk a little bit about where you're at a suburb, I think it is, called The Gap in Western Brisbane. It's on the Enoggera Creek. You're in a sort of, the golf course there sits in the lower parts. Looks like a lot of things around you rise up pretty high, and this is all going to add to the detail of what has happened to the golf course through this significant rain event. You got the creek running through. It flows off to the Brisbane River. There's a lot above you, including the dam. There's a lot of things that can go on with moving water down hills. It looks like it's sort of constrained by the topography locally around it. Is that sort of where the golf course fits?
Like probably the majority of golf courses in Brisbane anyway, and in probably most places around Australia, most golf courses have some element of floodplain. Yep. Ashgrove typically drains exceptionally well. It was unlovingly sort of referred to as a goat track for many years because of the changes in topography. But that gives us a massive advantage in regards to interest in holes, I find, and shot type. So you've always got a slightly sloping lie. We've got Enoggera Creek that runs through. So Enoggera Reservoir is just behind us, a few kilometres up the road. And that's the main creek that runs through the hole, past the clubhouse, through a few of our holes. We also have a small waterway that runs out. We back onto the Gallipoli Barracks in Brisbane, and there's a waterway that only runs when it rains. So generally it's a trickle, if that. It turned into much more than a trickle. So to give you an idea of the sort of topography feeding it, it's a valley that runs through the course. Our height above sea level is about 40 metres in that area of the course. And we've got a valley where the hills on either side go up to about 110, 120. So it just funnels all of the rain that comes through that area for about 10 kilometres down through the course out to the creek. So normally that's quite fine. But when you have we had 1,100 mils of water that fell on the course. Mount Glorious, which feeds into the reservoir, had 1,700 over 3 days. And when you have that amount of water, which is being channeled through a smaller area, there are fairly obvious repercussions of that. So it was not necessarily what we wanted to see, and it had some massive effects.
And I've seen some of the damage. People listening have probably seen some photos on social media and the like, and may have heard some of the results of that damage through the podcast and bits and pieces that I've mentioned on some other segments of the news parts. But it's those rainfall totals you talked about, they're more annual rainfall totals of the region that happen within 3 to 5 days. That's what we're talking.
Yeah, look, to give you a good guide, the biggest problem that Ashgrove typically has is that we don't have enough water. So going back into the mid-2010s, so 2015, 16, 17, we were having progressively less and less rain, sort of 800, 700, 600. And I think by 2017 or 2018, we had 500 mil of rain for the year. So we have a very small catchment on the course. We hold about 8 megalitres of water for anyone who's into dam capacities. Yep. And so that's obviously a very small amount of water to use to irrigate a golf course. To give an idea, a single round of watering for the course, if we put everything on, is 750,000 litres. So we basically have 10 cycles of full watering that we can use when our dam is from capacity to empty. We do have a license to draw from Enoggera Creek when it's running, but obviously if it stops running, which you get in a drought, we have very limited water. So there's been numbers of occasions where we have got to very close to having to buy water in. So that's a risk for the club. So the comparison between having 500 mil in a year and 1,100 in 3 days, and I think we had almost 500 in 1 day, is a massive change, and obviously the ground just can't deal with that. So the level of water coming through was significant.
It's staggering to think about, and it wasn't. I'm based in Sydney, as everyone knows, and we know that in 2018, 2019, it's a similar corresponding years. You're talking about, we in Sydney were facing heavy water restrictions. It was an extreme in the other way where we had, you're outside praying for rain. And that was common across the East Coast. Likewise, these last couple of years have been common across the East Coast with this extreme rainfall events and totals. And so it's hard to get your head around it being such a turn in only a couple of years, which is really devastating on another hand. And both of them have financial impacts. And expectation impacts from your membership, what people are looking for. They know that, it's an outdoor sport. You're dealing with growing on the ground and growing plants, and dealing, most of that is obviously dealt with by Mother Nature. You have to do your best that you can. There's financial impacts if you've got no rain, like you talked about. You had to consider potentially buying water, and you've got to minimize and reduce a great deal of water use when you really need the opposite almost when it's so dry. And you got to manage that, and that's a stressful time in a different way that you're having to deal with now, having way too much water go through.
Yeah, so it's one of those things where, like, the ground conditions at the moment, everything is soft, so the ball doesn't run as much, which makes the short course a bit longer, which is good for some and not so good for others. But we're just finding, especially compared to drought periods, like the amount of mowing that we have to do is radically increased. So that has an impact on what other things you can do around the course. Because we're suffering from flood damage as well, there's so many more jobs around the course that need to be completed, and we can't get to them all. So you end up with things that you just have to leave because you just have to get out on the mowers to keep the course under control. Otherwise, you just get to this stage where you're just chasing your tail every day. We've got a group of volunteers who come out as well and help us out, but it's just such a load. The difference between drought conditions and rain conditions that we're having now are just massive on your workforce in trying to make sure that you can get people to all the jobs. And then you have the issues of when it's raining all the time. Like, we've got forecast at the moment that it's going to rain for the next 2 weeks on and off. So how do you get your spray equipment out on the course, and how do you keep all of those things going to try and get you through the winter months? It's meant to have stopped raining a month ago. We're meant to be in the no rain period of the year, and it just keeps on raining. So trying to recover from a flood while it continues to rain just a little bit now and then just makes the job quite difficult.
Yeah, and financially speaking, you, like you said, then the work, I could tell my listeners from my experience that you can go from cutting fairways once a week barely in a dry period. If you really needed to, and cut it back depending on what you're up to, you could cut it once a fortnight to cutting 3 times a week. So you're almost tripling, if not 6 times, the amount of mowing needed across a fortnight, which you can then calculate that to wear and tear on the machines, let alone the fuel bill. I mean, and we all talk about the price of fuel at the moment, just personally at home, having to run around, do errands, travel to and from work. When you've got machines going, it's staggering how quickly that fuel bill can go north. And then you talked about spraying equipment. There's a lot more pressure on turf surfaces when it comes to high humidity, soil moisture content, the humidity around the plants. You then have to worry about diseases so much more often than normal. These are all knock-ons in a wet period, like you just said, let alone having to recover from damage from a flood.
Yeah, I don't like mowing my own lawn, let alone having to worry about mowing a whole golf course. So it's one of those things it's not my job to go and sit on a mower and do those things. But from a board perspective, we need to make sure that there's enough resources out there to do it, at the same time knowing that you've got a limited budget, so you can't just go and hire more people. With the additional problem at the moment, and I think most golf courses around Australia seem to be hitting this, is that trying to recruit green staff is a nightmare at the moment. There seems to be an ad for every golf course in Australia on the ASTMA Facebook page at the moment. And we're trying to recruit a 2IC at the moment and trying to find people. We've got the net out as far as we can reach, and if there's any guys who are looking for a step up, please let us know. But we're struggling to fill those roles because it's just so many clubs that are looking for more, and golf is so much more popular at the moment coming out of COVID. So the wear on courses is greater. So then you've got the time it takes you to maintain the course is longer because you've got to dodge all the golfers. So it's just this catch-22 where, you've got more money coming in because you've got more golfers, but you've still got to manage the golf course and the wear on the golf course and make sure that you keep the members happy for when we have the inevitable sort of plateauing of the desire to play golf.
There's a whole lot There's a whole lot going on there, Simon. There's a lot, and we're condensing it into obviously this short period post-COVID, lots of rain and damage. And I keep bringing up the damage. Let's talk a little bit about. Can you bring the listeners up to speed and give us a bit of an overview of what happened to the extent of the damage to your golf course? Because I describe it as pretty horrendous. It wasn't so much sitting underwater for a period of time. It's more what moving water can do to a property, especially a golf course. Give us an update on the extent of the damage.
Yeah, I try not to get my PTSD going when I talk about what happened. But so basically the Enoggera Creek came up. It reached a peak height that was, for people who are aware of Brisbane flood history, it was well above the 74 flood level. So we believe it's around about, through the course, the Enoggera Creek was around about 1.5 meters higher than any other previous flood. So we have a new par 4 that we opened towards the end of last year, which has grass on both sides and has the creek running through. And all of the grass in this little valley was covered by water. So that was a bit concerning to watch. And we were basically cut off from the rest of the course for about 2.5 days when the creek came up. We've got 6 creek crossings across the course, and all of those were underwater. The only way you could get out to the golf course was to walk through. There's a bridge and a little neighbourhood that you go about 2 kilometres down the road and wander back. But that bridge even was underwater for a period of time. So there was people cut off. We had videos of kids with boogie boards sliding down the fairways and various things like that. So you're sort of going, oh, something's going on. So we didn't get a chance straight away to see what happened over the creek, but we knew it wasn't going to be great. When we got out, a number of the holes sort of you looked at first and went, oh, that's okay. There's some silt and some debris and there's tree damage, but it doesn't look too bad. We then got out to the back of the course, and one of the areas that had the most damage is our third tee. So where we have that connects back to the Gallipoli barracks. This is where this massive amount of water ran through from the defence land. Basically came through, and we had a couple of 750 mil pipes that ran under the tee and sort of fed this natural creek, which have never been in any real drama. Except for this time where after about 2 days of being built up against the tee, it basically blew out like a 10-metre wide section of our tee. So wow. We've now got like a cavern, a hole between the front and back tee that's about 10 metres wide and 3 metres deep. So we're looking at how to fix that. The flow on from that is that when all the water was coming through from the defence land, it also brought with it a whole heap of deco. There's a granite quarry just over the hill. So we believe it found some sort of weak pocket up in the defence land and washed a whole bunch of material through, which basically filled up the creek line, which then damaged a lot of the entries to a little dam that we've got down there. So the dam path was basically washed away. The creek itself has about an extra 2 foot of deco and stuff through it. So it then flowed into the dam and it dropped a whole bunch. We think that we've lost about 3 metres of depth in the dam, so halved our capacity in that dam. That then flowed through to our next dam. So probably the easiest picture to tell is we've got probably a 10-metre round first dam. To stop silt going into our main dam, which is probably, let's say, 50 or 60 metres long by about 20 metres wide. That 10-metre dam was about 5 metres deep in the centre, and it was completely filled with deco. So you could actually walk across the surface. Somebody tried that just after the flood event to retrieve a golf ball, and apparently they sunk in up to their waist. So it wasn't very solid for a while.
I would not want to go into that. I'm just telling you right now. That might look solid, but that's quicksand written all over it.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you think that's the sort of quantity of silt of the deco that we had? We've also got that in the next dam, so it filled up that one and then flowed into the next one. So we think we've lost, let's say, 40% of our water holding capacity.
That's an enormous amount of material that's come down through the property to fill in effectively a pot. It's become a giant pothole that's now been filled, and then it's gone into your main irrigation dam, and the rest of it keeps going. That's like something. It's like a dam wall or something's released, or like you said, it was from a quarry or whatever. But that's an enormous amount of material.
Yeah, so that's one of our big problems of going, okay, we need to excavate that back out at some stage. When you excavate it out, where do you put it? Because it's all slop and it moves around, so you've got to bund it up and try and restrain it while it dries out. That water that was then running down overflowed the dam and then ran down our fifth fairway. So our fifth fairway basically became a river about probably 2 foot deep for the best part of 5 days. And it then met the water coming down Enoggera Creek, and that's where the problem that you get. The good thing about fast-moving water, it can create damage, but it doesn't drop much stuff. The problem with slow water, which is what Indooroopilly hit, and they're still cleaning up out there, is that as soon as it slows down, it can drop the sediment. So when it got to the point where the water would slow down and it came down and hit the Enoggera Creek water running the other way, that's where it dropped all of the lighter silt. So we ended up having, in some areas across our fifth fairway, like a foot of mud. Funnily enough, we had freshwater mussels that were lining the fifth fairway. And you're sort of going, in between that and about 1,000 golf balls, it was just weird looking along. There's these black mussels just sitting on the mud, and you're going, where have they even come from?
That's bizarre.
Yeah, so that was interesting. You didn't want to try and retrieve the golf balls because you just sank into the silt. So that was the main part of our water. In addition to the collapse that we had on the third tee, we had a collapse. Our 17th tee is sort of elevated up a sheer sort of cliff, for want of a better term, and we had part of that retained area collapse, and it collapsed into a water hazard area that we have behind the 16th green. Went down the drainage pipe in there, which then resulted in blocking up our pipes down further, which then flooded our 15th fairway. So it's one of those things of you're never quite sure what's going to happen when things start to fall apart. So we've got to try and work out how to, and that's a good quantity. It's probably a 6 metre high retained wall that sort of fell away. So there was a large amount of material there that we just now we're still trying to move around and work out. That's probably the main parts of our collapse damage. But then the biggest thing is the areas where the water from the Enoggera Creek came. When it sits, you get the silt. So then we had to get excavators in basically to just drag the silt off the fairways. We had working bees the week after the floods came through, and we would have 50, 60, 70 members out with shovels and rakes just trying to get silt off fairways before it solidified. Because if it solidifies, it just sets hard as a rock, and you
new playing service, mate. Start again. So we were pushing that along, and we had trying to find excavators in Brisbane after the flood is rare as hen's teeth, and trying to find an excavator now to do anything is really hard. So we were really fortunate. We've got some contacts who were able to get a couple of excavators out to site, so we could push like the fifth fairway and the 15th fairway. We could push off a large amount of the silt into mounds and start moving that away. But wow,
it was a bit of a nightmare. The big thing that from the creek perspective, once the creek goes down, we could then assess our bridges. So like I said, we've got a causeway and 5 bridges. Of those bridges, we've got one bridge that remained relatively intact. I think it lost one board and had the railings banged up a bit. That was really fine, but that's on our first hole. But the other 4 bridges were damaged. We were able to fix up the one that's across. We've got 2 sections of the course. One section's a council lease. On the council lease land, we had one bridge that had minor repairs, and we got that up relatively quickly. But then we've got 2 bridges that have basically been wiped out. So one of the bridges on our 14th hole has about a 10-degree angle to it at the moment, and has a big twist in the middle. So not really very good for getting across. And our bridge on the 18th hole, which is one of our most critical access points, we used to have some props. It's an old bridge. We used to have some props in there at the splice points in the bridge, It was an old timber telegraph pole bridge, and we had some props in. But the areas where we had the props, the entire bank just got eroded away. So the props disappeared, and we can't actually put them back in because there's nothing to put there. So that's one that we need to replace, which is obviously replacing a 22-metre span bridge is not a cheap exercise.
Wow, that's what an enormous amount. I was wondering in my head whether it was just those couple of sections that I'd seen some photos of, or you're talking, there's a great deal of size and of the land of the golf course that's been affected by that moving water. Then you add to it the silt. I mean, there's a lot of repair work needed, a lot of quick, fast recovery stuff like you talked about, cleaning up some of that silt while it's still soft and pliable to get rid of it. And then there's the longer term stuff with the collapsed retaining walls and larger areas that have been taken away that you've got to consider. Simon, it's really interesting that you also mentioned there, and it gives people a sense of scale again, where you talked about having 60 or 70 odd members volunteering time with shovels to help clean up silt. I mean, that's not a small party of people. That's an army of people. I wonder, obviously you've got a very well patronised membership of the club and everyone's helping out with across the board in Brisbane and other parts of the country with these floods. To get that many people, that's a bit of a deep breath taken in and going, wow, this is so good that we're able to get this extra bit of help, isn't it? I mean, that I don't know how you'd assess and wonder how you're going to be able to fix all these areas. That's a big. I still can't get my head around. That's a lot.
Yeah, look, we're very blessed to have a membership at Ashgrove that not only enjoys their golf, but loves the club as a whole. We've got some really long-term members, but to give people an idea of the sort of membership change that we have had, back in our Diamond Jubilee year, I think, which was 2014, they put the membership numbers in the book, and I think we had around about 450 people who had playing rights on a Saturday. And I think now we're up around 900.
Wow.
So in seven or 8 years, there's been big steps made forward. And look, that goes back to the quality of the course staff that we've had. So many of the people listening might know Darren Allen, who was here at the club for about 8 years. He's recently moved on in the last couple of years. And we now have James Melville in that role, and he's doing a fantastic job. And the course has improved year on year as we've made some strategic decisions about how to run the club and what we believe we are as a club, and the steps that you just make progressively. So we used to be working with equipment that was not overly great, but there was a distinct decision made going back about 9 years ago that we were going to get the right equipment for the job. So we've got a red shed now, Toro equipment typically throughout. We've got a clear replacement strategy, so we can go through and do all those things. And the membership has grown as we've done those things. In addition to that, we have a strong recruitment policy that we come in. My general manager, Mick Ronan, would kill me if I didn't say there's going to be a fantastic deal coming up in the next few months to become a member at Ashgrove. So if you're thinking about it, come on in. It'd be a great deal. But we've typically have like a 16-month recruitment deal each year. It ranges around about sort of the $1,100 or something around about that figure to get people in. And our retention rate on memberships is well above 50%. So the people who are coming in and sort of just to trial it are typically staying. And a lot of those people are buying into the ethos, essentially, of Ashgrove, is that it's more than just somewhere you play golf. It's part of a community.
That's what I was about to say, is that you the club's obviously, like you said, it's about understanding who you are as a club and what you want to be and putting in those strategies in place and the like to get to where you want to go. But you're a key part of the community. No one gets 1,000 members or thereabouts, in general, just because you exist. It doesn't happen that way. But also I go back to that reflection of having that many volunteers that have said yes to being able to help out on course. I mean, that conversion to get nearly 10% of your membership to come out on course volunteering, to go from being a weekly golfer or whatever they might be out there playing golf 3 times a week or once a week, to manning a shovel. That's a pretty big step to convert. I know plenty of clubs that wouldn't get that. But to get that...
I reckon it was much more than 10%, because we had probably 4 days of working bees in a week. And like the people who came out on the Wednesday were like, there's probably 50% that were the same, but there were different people each day as they could. And people coming back. And because, like, I tell you what, it's not easy work pushing silt off fairways. We had a group of juniors out there who were just pushing mud, and you know what juniors are like. They're willing to give anything a crack. And so it was really good. There were people working side by side who typically, like the way that people got to know each other, the experience of going through that as a group, I think it only binds the club closer together. And that's the thing, is Ashgrove is very much a club that we don't have any airs and graces. We know that we're not a championship length golf club. We know that we have our flaws. But we're very keen to lean into the things that are a strength to us. So rather than seeing our size as being a disadvantage, we have to see our course length as being something that we can see as a positive, and looking at the topography as a positive, and saying what things make us different from everyone else to make us the best possible version of Ashgrove that we can be. And that's what we have to work on like a daily and a weekly and a monthly and then a yearly basis, to keep on making sure that we don't go, oh, look, we're Ashgrove, look, we know everything about running a small club, look how awesome we are. And being able to relate to our members in a way that they know that we're listening to them. So one of the things that I've started doing is I do a thing called Course Corner, which, as much as I dislike doing videos on YouTube, I do typically it's like a 5 to 7 minute thing, sort of once a month or once every couple of months when I get around to it, just detailing what we're doing around the course so everyone can sort of know about it, working through that. If people are interested in what the damage is, we've got like a 25-minute YouTube video that just walks around the course and shows people exactly what was wrong. But that sort of member engagement aspect of it is something that, for us as a smaller club, we want people to buy into who we are, and we want them to be part of the experience of being part of Ashgrove, because going back for many, many, many years, Ashgrove has always been a club that relied on the bond of being a member of Ashgrove. You knew that you weren't a member at RQ, you weren't playing the best course in the world, but you were there because of the people. And we want to grow on that to say, well, yes, the course has so many positive aspects. It'll make you better at all of these things, and at the same time, you can have a really great social experience at the same time.
Mate, I'm really loving the way that you guys as a committee and as a board are talking about yourselves, and you've got clearly an engaged membership, and I think that's a key, the information flow, all these thought processes and working the direction that you want to take as a club is fantastic. Where I sit from the outside, and I've been part of a couple of clubs, and I've seen the way that they communicate and talk, and really what you guys are talking about here, what you're talking about here and now, is a reflection on that level of membership and the engagement of that membership into a flood recovery. And I will bring it back to that, because that's showing, like I said before, it's showing how much people feel about the club. And to get that level of conversion to helping out and a volunteer, but that's incredible, and that's wonderful. And as a club, you've done it very, very well, mate. Yeah. I want to look for a bit of insight, if you don't mind, to maybe some of the decisions. What was the first, whether you call it an emergency board meeting or the like, after this devastation to the golf course, where everyone's probably got dollar signs spinning in their heads, going and thinking about how you're going to recover from it, what path to take, what steps to make first. What was that, meeting like with the core group, the board and the committees? How did that go?
Yeah, well, I think we had a bit of time to prepare for, to get our head around what was actually happening, because for 3 days we could sit up on the deck and just watch the river flowing through the course. And like you could sit up there. We had the bar open, so you could sit up there and people were just having a beer, just looking out and just going, "Wow, look at the power of that." And people could get a fairly clear understanding that there were going to be problems. So we could then sort of sit back and go, okay, well, what are the key things that we need to do? And so one of the things we initially thought about was, how do we actually get to a point where we can reopen the course? People obviously go, oh, look, there's been a flood. We're not expecting to play tomorrow morning. But that sort of grace period has a certain expiry date. So you want to be able, and also you want to be able to get money coming back through the club, because from a daily perspective, it's not just the green fees that you're missing. It's the money that comes through the bar because you don't have people coming through the course. It's money that doesn't go to all of the different aspects through the pro shop and all of those things. So getting the course back open was a priority. So until we could get out on the course, obviously you can't do too much, and you sort of just hope that everything's okay. When we actually got out and we sort of looked at the areas where we had silt across fairways, we realised that we didn't really have an option. If we wanted to save parts of the course, we just had to mobilise people and try to get any machinery that we could, by hook or by crook, to work on the course. So the rain basically stopped on the Monday. On the Tuesday, the water had gone down enough in the creek that we could actually get out on the course, because we didn't want to obviously have any of our members out on the course until we could assess it for safety. So that's the first step, is going, okay, can we get people out onto the course to assist us in cleaning up? So we did a day of just walking around the course. One of the major things that we lost were things like valve cover boxes. So the water had just picked them up and taken them away. So you don't want members walking across the course and putting their leg down a irrigation spot and breaking an ankle or things like that. So getting the guys out on course, just marking danger zones and then going, okay, well, what can we actually do to try and help? And so we sort of went, okay, well, there's still water running through these things. We can start trying to push some of the silt off. So that was where we had these crews of people just going, right, okay, you guys take your shovels, bring in a shovel, bring in a wheelbarrow, go for your life, and push that all off. We were lucky enough to get a couple of excavators to try and start moving silt off. In the middle of that, we had another big rain event on the Thursday, I believe. It rained heavily again, which then liquefied everything again. So stuff was running everywhere. So a lot of the stuff, we didn't really get a lot of new material, but it actually probably helped soften up some of the silt again. So then we had people out again on the Friday and on the Saturday. And then by the Sunday, we were able to open 3 holes for a nearest the pin, just come out and have a hit, just to sort of get people to go, right, come out and have a look, and we did that for about a week, just so people could actually come out, have a look at the course, see what the issues are, because I think until you actually see what's happened, it just doesn't feel real. Knowing that the course has sustained damage is one thing. Down by anyone who knows the course, Bennett's Road runs through the 2 sections of the course, so it splits the council leased land from the land that we own. That road was destroyed, basically. The asphalt across that was in millions of pieces, so council had to come back and repave that road so that the residents could get in and out. And it eroded away a section of the creek that was 10 metres wide, of the creek bank in that area as well. So things like services for Powerlink are exposed and things like that. So having people being able to come out and see that, there's a majority of people came out and helped us, but then there were other people who just wanted to come out and have a few holes and see what was going on, and trying to get them to do that in a safe way. That was a key thing. So once we got to that stage of being able to get the course open a bit, then you go through the stages of, okay, well, what's safe and what's not. So we opened 9 holes to start with, so we could get people out on the course while we were still trying to clean up some of the more affected areas. From there, you're working through the emergency phase. I like to call it the emergency phase and the future phase. You keep on plugging away at the things that just have to happen, and you don't really have much of an option on what you're going to do. You're just trying to get the course open. So clearing paths, removing dangerous branches, getting rid of the silt, and cutting grass again. That was a big one of when could you actually get mowers back out on the course without destroying the course? Because everything's so soft and wet. So going through that process, we then got to the point where we said, okay, we've got 18 holes back open. What do we do now? And you go through the harder point of it, which is going, okay, we've got some decisions to make here about what we do. So, for instance, we initially said that, look, we're not going to put any bunkers back in play. I think we had one bunker that was functional. We just said, look, until we can assess more, we're just going to leave all the bunkers out of play. We've progressively sort of got some back. We've still got half of our bunkers probably out of play.
Yep.
Because the amount of sand that we lost was significant. We've only got 32 bunkers on the course, and we sort of did an assessment and said if we were to blow all of the contaminated sand out of these bunkers and replace it with new sand, it's around about 600 to 650 tons of sand. And you just sort of go, like, the numbers just become surreal, and you can't really get your head around what you're actually sort of putting together. I was talking to one of our members who works for Twin View Turf, and he was talking about one course that's watered 86,000 square meters of turf, and you just scratch your head and go, "This is insane. What am I actually trying to do here to repair the course?"
It's funny because it's not a process like you've explained there quite well and in depth the steps that the club's taken, but it's not something where you hit the panic button, you go, well, we've got to get it fixed tomorrow, because not only do you deal with the things that you've talked about there in terms of safety and there's time and getting the mowers back out there on the golf course and all that. When it comes down to deciding the harder questions of bunker sands and reinstating bunkers and fixing up retained areas, they're the big dollar sign parts. They're the 650 ton of sand. I mean, you put a dollar sign attached to that. That hasn't got the bunkers done. That's just brought the sand from the supply yard to your property at the golf course. It hasn't done anything with it.
No.
We've just got a big pile.
And we've got a number of bunkers that are just irreparably damaged. So there's no point in putting sand in those. We'd just be borrowing a future problem. So one of the big questions that we have is, okay, now that we've got to a functional state, we still have issues. How do we move from the functional state to the future state? And now we've identified all of our insurance issues. Because we have a creek running through the course, we can't insure against flood, so our bridges are not covered under our flood insurance. We do have some coverage for general damage across the course, but it's nowhere near enough to cover the costs of repairing things. So we sort of work backwards and go, okay, well, we believe we've got X dollars. What are the most critical projects and where do we move? And look, for us, the most critical project is going to be our 18th bridge. And unfortunately, that carries a sort of $150,000 price tag to get that done and replaced and in place. So when you're talking about items of that sort of quantum, you suddenly look at it and go, how do we actually get those funds? And we'll be able to cover probably that in insurance. We're very hopeful. We've had a commitment from our local member in the federal election for funding. And look, that's a massive thing for us. We've been given a commitment of $500,000.
Wow.
But that's then obviously dependent on them getting back in. So so we're unable to make anything strategic yet. We can make plans. But the biggest thing is to conveying to members that we have lots of ideas, but we're not going to commit to those ideas until we're absolutely certain of the funding that we have to put those in place.
Yep.
So, and obviously $500,000 is a massive difference. So if we have access to that, the difference that we can make to the course is huge. If we don't get that, we then have to go, okay, well, there are going to be areas of our course that are going to suffer for multiple years because we can't get to all of those things with the funds that we have available. So we're still working. We're working with insurance. We're working with our local members. We're trying to get whatever funding we can, but it's very easy to sort of sit down and go panic, 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 panic. The harder thing probably to do is to sit back and go, okay, breathe, just think about all of these things, get all your things together, but don't get so far down the track that you lose sight of how you're going to get there. Just one step after the other. Each day is a new day. You still put your pants on in the morning. Every day has a certain rhythm that you have to keep on going, because if you let it overwhelm you, you're going to fall apart.
Well, absolutely. It almost, if you sat down in a corner and looked at it all in front of you, it would be an insurmountable pile to get your head around. But like you said, and hearing you talk about the club as a whole and the community that it sits within, and the active membership that you have, and that flow of information, I think hearing you talk about it is formulating that path, whatever that path is, depending on, once you work out, like you said, what funds you have available to the club and what you can work with, determining that path. I think, provided the membership, you work with them the way that you have done it seems like they will obviously understand it. And I think that the amount of damage that's been done, these things can't be fixed in 3 months, in 6 months, in 12 months. Some of these things, like you said, regardless of whether you get access to a funding of support, they're still going to take probably a good couple of years to deal with anyway, because it's like you're essentially rebuilding the golf course to a certain extent, and that doesn't happen in 12 months. I mean, building a golf course doesn't happen. You guys had a long time to get to 18 holes, and this has disrupted, what golf course you have. It's going to take a while to get there. And I don't know that anyone would expect it to be 12 months. Maybe I'm a bit naive about that. I'd like to think most people in the sport that participate understand that something at this level, which so many golf courses have had to deal with and are dealing with, this isn't going to happen in 12 months. It's going to take longer.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing from probably the club perspective is that we're still in a recruitment phase. We're still trying to get to full membership. And that's a target that we would have been chasing for a while. So being in a position where you've got damaged infrastructure, trying to recruit members becomes much harder, because the people that you've actually got and they've been through the event, you're probably more likely to retain them because they've been part of the experience and they've seen what happens. Trying to bring new people in when they come in and go, well, look at that, that wall's fallen off. That's a bit more difficult. So it's about going, okay, well, this is our roadmap. This is how we're going to get there, knowing that there is a certain time frame that you have to do things before people get a bit sick of seeing construction everywhere. Yep. And they don't think that you're actually moving on these things. Like our members have been fantastic. And I get lots of queries on what we're doing and how we're doing it. And you just have to keep on saying, look, we are not moving on anything until we get surety of our finance, because at the end of the day, COVID could be a thing that's gone. We could have a drought. We could drop off in membership and our income streams reduce. Look, I don't think that's going to happen. Golf is becoming more and more rare. Like, we've lost Victoria Park in Brisbane. We've now lost the hills at Jimboomba. North Lakes is gone. So that the availability of golf is becoming smaller. And it's not like you can just put a new golf course out there very easily. Obviously, we've got Minipee coming on board in Brisbane in a little while, but that's still a little while off. But golf is at its most popular in a long time. So we need to lean into that and take advantage of that. So we want everyone to be able to come and join up at Ashgrove and play out at Ashgrove. And we need to keep on stepping along the process, but it doesn't mean that it makes it easier, that's for sure.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. But a question that I've got that jumps into my head a little bit with a process of repairing and to the level and extent of some of the areas on the golf course that are going to take a little bit longer, would the club consider something like, instead of just reinstating what was there, is this an opportunity to look at maybe trying to improve some of those areas that were lost or damaged or washed away, or instead of just reinstating what you had?
Yeah, absolutely. And that becomes the hard question of how much money do you throw at a problem, and relative to how much you've got. So, for example, we've got, let's say we've got a short par 3, 6th hole. It's got 2 bunkers that have been destroyed. And look, gut feel to replace a bunker is, let's say it's $15,000 a bunker.
Yep.
To replace a green complex might be $75,000. Or something like that. So do you say, okay, well, that green needs to be replaced? We've been putting that off for years. It's moving around and doing horrible things. Do we put more money into that area, or do we just fix the bunkers? So you have to be really careful of how you apply the money that you get. And I could talk to 6 different architects, and they would have 6 different ideas probably. I could talk to 100 different members, and they probably have 100 different ideas. So it's trying to filter all of that information to say, okay, what is the key thing about our course? And really, as a board, we should have a really clear picture of what aspects of the way that golf is played at Ashgrove, what sort of design things lead into that. And we've had a really good picture of that. We had a design process with Graham Papworth and Golf Spectrum, who did our 8th hole. So we've got a bit of an understanding now of how the relationship between us, golf architect, and golf constructor sort of works, and what the best way of doing these projects is. The big question for us is, okay, if you've got a tee that's broken next to a green that's not great, next to some bunkers that are broken, can you package all of that up into one thing and get better bang for your buck? And the big question always is, are you better doing 80% of 100% of the things, or are you better doing 100% of 80% of the jobs, if that makes sense? So do you absolutely do that thing to 100%, or do you split the money out and go, well, we couldn't quite do that as well as we wanted? One of the things that we've tried to do wherever we can is do the whole job in a location. So if we're going to do it, we're going to do it. If we can't afford to do it, well, we won't do it now, or we'll wait till we can. Because I think there's so many places that you can just try and stretch the money so far, and it just doesn't give you the result that you want. And especially bunkers are a good example of that. Like, we could go and patch up the bunkers, but in 3-4 years' time, we'll be back in exactly the same spot. So do we sit off, and do we get some more money so we can actually do like a capillary concrete or a drained gravel base in our bunkers? Or do we do the short-term thing? So they're the sort of questions that we have to answer. Obviously, as greens director, I want the best possible products for the course, but I also have to put on that hat of, okay, you've got a limited amount of money. How are we best going to use it?
Absolutely, and there's a lot to that. And you mentioned Golf Spectrum. You mentioned that you've had work done there in the past at the golf course, and the relationship with Golf Spectrum along the way. So, I take it that Nathan, and I had Nathan on the podcast a couple of podcast episodes ago. Great guy. I've known Nathan for a little while now, and he done some work in the past. So does that mean that there's a potential path to go down in maybe some initial conversations with a guy like Nathan, just to see the extent of the works required?
Well, he's been out to site and had a bit of a wander around and had a look, but it's one of those things where you don't know exactly what you're going to do yet. So I can ask him to price up any number of things. And look, I've had to reach out to a number of different companies to sort of give us some quotes, knowing that we're probably not going to do the things that I'm asking you to quote on. Because you either need to get them for insurance purposes, you need to get them so you've got all of the options. So you don't want to lean on these people really hard and make them annoyed at you because you're not getting these things done. Obviously, because Nathan's done some work out there, I can lean on him a bit harder and sort of say, look, mate, you've been out here before, come and help us out. But it's also that thing where you don't want it to be a relationship where it's sort of like a fait accompli, for instance, where you just say, oh, they'll just do our work. And you've got to make sure that you're trying to get the best out of all the contractors who you're possibly going to use, which is a bit of a challenge because you're trying to you've got to build a great relationship. Nathan works really well for Ashgrove because he really is a sort of Ashgrove sort of guy. He's that salt of the earth sort of guy. He talks to you straight. He won't beat around the bush, and that works really well. He sat on the balcony with our treasurer having a beer after the floods, and it's just one of those things of being able to. It communicates really well with us, so that works really well. But you just have to keep on working through the process and going, okay, we need this, and until you actually have the money in place, you don't want to say we're going to do X, Y, and Z, because that can radically change.
Indeed, it certainly can. There's still uncertainty that sits around decisions that need to be made. And you talked about there, Simon, having to discuss, the possibility of work with different contractors and people with machinery. And you did mention earlier how difficult it is with machinery. And if you come to the point where you've got to press a button, it's not only picking the right contractor, but then getting it in the time frame that you guys then want your work done. So because there's lots of golf courses that are doing cleanup and doing work, and you're in the southeast of Queensland. We talked about in Brisbane. Know that Nathan and Golf Spectrum are in that region, but it doesn't mean you're going to get him either. If it comes to the conversation of saying we want to do this work and you're the right man for the job, and he says, well, now I'm committed somewhere else potentially because they need the work there, and it was before you guys were able to make your call.
Yeah, exactly. And look, from a course perspective, we've typically, because we are limited on finance, we have typically taken on more risk in our projects. So for the example on the 8th, we could have said to Nathan, look, come in, we want you to do everything from woe to go. That'll be fantastic. But we just didn't have the funds to do that. So we broke it up into a construction phase of the earth moving, which Nathan did. We then did all of the turf laying ourselves and a lot of the other work ourselves so that we could save some money. When you start looking at multiple projects at once, you run out of that facility to sort of be selective, if for want of a better term. Like, you can't do it yourself because you just don't have the manpower. And that's a lot of the things with when we're looking at insurance. We have to sort of say, look, we built our gravel path network over 20 years. And in one shot, it's all been washed out. So It's not like we can't say, oh, well, we built it over 20 years and we used volunteers for half of it, so it cost us less than it should. So the replacement cost is completely different to what the installation cost was for us. But you still need to do it. And you sort of go, okay, well, how do we actually get all of these things done that we need to do and do them in a financially responsible way? Rather than rushing to the finish line, you have to make sure that you make the right steps so that you're not throwing your money too fast away, and you can actually get good bang for your buck across the projects, because it's so easy to spend money on things that aren't actually giving you a real benefit, especially on a golf course.
Yeah, absolutely it is. It's a very easy way to, any golf club can do that. I know I can say that I've seen it in places that I've worked in the past too. But a question that I've got a bit more of, a financial one from the club's perspective, through a period of being shut down on the golf course because there wasn't a golf course that was playable. That has a short-term financial impact on the club. Did the club have to consider, were we able to keep all of our paid staff on, or how were those discussions going as well? Did they get looked at? Did you have to go, geez, our income sort of come to a full stop in the short term? We really need to, watch what's going on, because we might need to consider maybe becoming a little bit lighter to get through the next 12 months, for example. How did the club go with that?
It's interesting because, really, we've been through the COVID period where, when COVID was first kicking off, we went through that in a big way. Like, in Brisbane, we were obviously less impacted than Melbourne and I think Sydney in regards to shutdowns, but we pretty much played. I think we had 4 days where the course was shut because of COVID, in comparison to many weeks in other locations. So we went through a lot of those processes going, okay, how do we keep the course going on skeleton staff, blah, 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 blah. But when you have a flood, you don't really have that option, because everyone on the course staff is just absolutely flat out trying to get the course recovered so you can get people back. You can't cut, especially at the moment where we've got continually moist conditions. You've got grass growing at a ridiculous rate. If you let the course go, you're going to spend months and months and months trying to recover it. So you're sort of stuck. You can't cut back on your staff, because if you do, the long-term effects of that are going to be huge. When the course was closed, we still had the bar open and things like that. So we never had to reduce staff hours. Like obviously when the rain was coming down, we said to some of the guys, look, no point coming in because you can't get across the bridges. So I think that was only a couple of days though where we did that. Like we had to relocate all of the stuff from the sheds up to the clubhouse because I think we had an inch of water through the greens shed, and generally the guys, like a lot of our guys live locally. We've got 2 new apprentices on staff, both of who live very close to the course and are both members of the course as well. So they were down having a look around, helping out, trying to recover. Like we had things floating away and you're sort of going, oh, grab that while you can. And so like there was no need for us to lay staff off. The big question in the immediate aftermath is a cash flow issue, because you've got excavators in. You've got all of these things happening. You don't have any money coming through the course. So you're going, okay, how do we actually make sure that we can pay the bills? And look, we've got a club overdraft facility that we can draw on if we need to, but you obviously don't want to be in those positions. We've been really fortunate through the whole COVID period where golf has obviously been very, very popular. So our financial reserves were better than they have been in the past, to the point where we were looking at pulling the trigger on some projects. Funnily enough, those projects got put on the shelf after all of this because we've spent that money recovering the course. And there's silly little things like we've got a grant that we get from the state government, which is 50 grand, which is great. But before we can actually get that money, we need to show the invoices that we've spent money on, and we also have to have our insurance done. So we've spent that money. We will get it back in the future, but we don't have it now. So all of those issues with cash flow are above my pay grade, and I'm just worried about the course. You just make sure I've got enough money to pay for my equipment, and that's fine. But it is a thing that our treasurer's grey hair count goes up by the day when he starts looking at these things.
And they're all the decisions that need to be thought of, and it's that's the inner workings of a board and the different committees that advise on the where things need to go and suggest we need money for this, that, and the other. Everyone's pulling in their own direction, and you're pulling in yours, and but everyone sits there with a level head and says, okay, well, we're all part of the big picture here, and we all need to not be I suppose greedy in a sense, but it needs to be measured.
Yeah, and, I think in an emergency, everyone sort of like you fall back to the absolute essentials, and you sort of go, look, we need to do this. Do we have the resources to do it? And if it's a yes, then you go fantastic. If it's a no, you go, okay, well, how do we get around this problem? And unfortunately, we didn't have too many no's. It was a yes, we can do that because we've had a good couple of years. But it's still one of those things now where we're still waiting for money to come in. We're waiting for insurance money to come in. We're waiting for grant money to come in. And so now we're in the situation where we don't want to move on anything else until those things are resolved, so we don't get ahead of ourselves and get ourselves into trouble. Because for all we know, there could, like next week, there could be another major event. And if you get too far ahead of yourself, you never know what's going to happen, as we found out with COVID. Nothing is guaranteed, and everything is a risk.
Absolutely, indeed, and look at it all. Stems. I think the club's position financially, and being through COVID and being on the receiving end of a positive side to golf, which the industry's had on a broad sense. But your time previous, the 5 to 10 years previous, for Ashgrove has been a good time for the club in terms of recruitment, building that membership, and clearly a very engaged membership, and part of the community. The club being part of the local community as well has put you in good stead for having that great patronage from the locals and from the members. And I think a lot of that says a lot for where you are at the moment moving forward, and the decisions that the club is obviously going to make moving forward on the back of this. And part of the team that you're in, being the Greens director and part of the board in the broader sense, it looks like the club is very measured in what they have to do and what they're looking forward to being able to do to close that gap on improving the place after being hit by this devastating scenario. So
absolutely. I think the biggest thing from my perspective as a board member is the effect that golf has on people's mental health. And I think it's an underrated aspect of our society that we're more separated from each other. So being able to have a facility like Ashgrove, which has got such a big community aspect, and enabling people to come out, have a safe space, like, you know how good guys are at talking about how their lives are going. Having people able to play golf, go out, talk about their lives, get some space. It's such a critical aspect, and look, we're really lucky to be a part of Ashgrove. And after I've been a member I grew up at Capera, and that was a great experience. But what I've experienced at Ashgrove since I've joined up there and been part of the board is just amazing. And it's one of those things that it's really important that we keep small clubs vibrant and alive, and that we make people see that golf isn't elitist, and it's not just for the people who've got cash to splash around, but it's for the everyday person who wants to get out. And the more that we can get our young people out, like we've got a massive number of 20 to 30-year-olds now, and it's fantastic having the energy that they bring to a club is huge. And we just need to keep on building on that community aspect to make people see that golf is much more than just you go and whack a ball around the course for 18 holes. It's about a community. It's about having somewhere to belong. And it's about understanding you and your mates better. And I think that's really important.
Absolutely. Great words, Simon. Great words said about it. And you know, in terms of the club, you guys are public access golf course. You got men, women, juniors that are all active players and the like that come to the club?
Yeah, absolutely. So during the week, it's obviously harder to get a game on the weekend than it used to be. But on Sundays, we've got opportunities to play for anyone who wants to come in. During the week, we have our competitions on a Thursday as opposed to a lot of places that have them on a Wednesday up here. So we're open to anyone who wants to come and play if you've got a handicap. So encourage people. We typically have spaces available on a Thursday. I know a lot of clubs don't have spaces in their competitions at the moment. But we'd love everyone to come out and experience Ashgrove. I think it's got a lot to offer. I think the conditions of the course now are quite good, not to humble brag. But it's one of those things where we're really proud of the course. It's a great place to play golf. The surroundings are fantastic. The wildlife is amazing. And it's a great place to be.
Wonderful stuff. What a great way to finish on a positive note, and where Ashgrove sits, in the local community. It's something that I think sounds like a great golf course to visit and a great golf club to visit as well. And I think it sounds really like a really nice place to go and have a hit. Being a shorter course, I think it opens up a whole different sort of approach to beginners and to some of the shorter hitters that can be daunting by going out to those big flashy golf courses, the big new ones, the resort style courses. You're up in Brizzy, you can get out to a place like Ashgrove. It's a bit shorter, a little bit easier to work your way around, and it sounds like a very inviting place to go and experience, mate. So
I think a few of our members would probably disagree that it's an easier place to get around than others, but look, it's a great place to be, and I wouldn't be anywhere else.
Fantastic. Well, look, Simon, it's been wonderful to having you on the Golfing Greenkeeper podcast as part of the Boardroom segment. It's been a great insight to some of the decisions that a club like Ashgrove post this sort of catastrophe has to consider, and the paths that you've got to walk down in time to sort of work your way out of it and rebuild in a sense. And I really do appreciate that level of insight and openness, mate. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thanks for your time, Steve.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. Ashgrove Golf Club. Look, it's a club that, like so many on the east coast of Australia, are dealing with the devastation of floods of a couple of months ago. It's a process. It's a long process. They know what's ahead of them. They realise that it's an uphill battle. And as you heard from Simon, they've got a plan in place moving forward, and still plenty of decisions to make. And look, I personally, I can say I wish Ashgrove very, very well. I'd love to catch up with Simon from time to time and keep tabs on how they're going and how they're able to repair the golf course and slowly improve their golf course at the same time. And it's going to be one to follow. But there you go, Ashgrove Golf Club, a public access facility, a members-based golf club as well in the western suburbs there of Brisbane at the Gap. And you've heard Simon talk about their great history and the long road that they had to build their golf club up to a wonderful community-based club that they have there. It's fantastic. What a great facility. And I'm sure those of you who've seen it, you know it's a great golf club and a great golf course. And to anyone else that's thinking about it, why not get out there and have a chance to look at it as well and see what's going on over there, because I think it's a place that we, being on the shorter side, it's something that might be intriguing and interested in seeing. And look, you heard Simon as well, and I will mention, if anyone's interested, assistant superintendent's role going on there that's available. If you're interested in applying for that, for the assistant's position, just catch up with Ashgrove Golf Club or send me a message or something and happily put you in touch with them. But look, all the best to Ashgrove Golf Club. I hope you enjoyed that one, guys. Please like, share, subscribe, as I do always say, and I appreciate Simon Putral's honesty and openness in the conversations that we had as well. So look, I hope you guys enjoyed it, and one to kick off a new time for the boardroom. Hopefully we'll get a few more inside conversations coming soon. So there you go, guys. You have yourselves a wonderful day. You hit them clean, we'll keep them green, and I'll catch up with you soon.